I'd like to welcome everyone to the special board meeting of the Willoughby-Eastlake Schools Board of Education here at 35353 Curtis Boulevard in Eastlake, Ohio. Our first item of business is call to order. Mr. Charnado?
Dr. Beal?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Brewer? Here. Mr. Raskus?
Here.
Mrs. Durn?
Here.
Mr. Porter?
Thank you. And I believe that we have a presentation.
We do. Thank you, Mr. President. So, just some general information I think is pertinent to share with all of you regarding the difficult decision that needs to be made this evening. And I have some data and some other information that I would like to share. But I do want to start by saying what is the obvious for all of us, that this is an incredibly difficult decision. This is a decision that there is no right or wrong answer per se, and there are certainly strong arguments and strong feelings on both sides of the spectrum. And at the end of the day, I think we have to make the decision that makes the most sense for the overall health and safety, both physically and mentally, for our students, as well as the health and safety of our staff, and ultimately the community, as we play a large role in the complete picture of Willoughby-Eastlake schools. So with that being said, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the district grade criteria for opening and closure of the school district and our reopening guidelines. And the uniqueness of that is I firmly believe, and I know the board supports this, that it's much better if you can foresee a difficult scenario, a situation, to make those difficult choices and put those plans in place prior to being in the throes of that controversy. Because once you're in the throes of that controversy, just like we are today, so many factors play into that decision making and influence that decision making, where in August when we put our plan together, there was not the same pressures that we all feel today. So it's much better to build that plane on the ground versus trying to build that plane in the air. However, I think it is also important to note that we were building a plane to fly through a challenge that we did not know what it would bring. So that's what I think is important to bring you all up to speed. We shared that plan with our community in as many ways as we possibly could, to include a town hall meeting, dial-outs, e-blasts, and videos out to the community along with a letter. We have always, and I want to say, not unchanging, remind people this is a fluid document that has to change and be modified as we go through these and learn more. We certainly know far more today than we learned yesterday, and also the rules by which we wrote our plan, that I'll share some of those changes, have changed repeatedly, that being CDC guidance from other professionals along the way, which has further complicated it. But I want to start with where are we right now, our dashboard. So can you pull up the dashboard? So Catherine's going to pull up the dashboard for us. But what you're going to see there are 11 student cases and 4 staff cases. That's a bit of a change even from before we went on this last quarantine, district quarantine. They include 2 new student cases that were reported today, or 2 new cases that were reported today. One is a staff and one is a student. Neither one, we're currently working on the quarantine list for that student, which could potentially impact other students. Because once again, this was an event put together that had all good intentions of students, but it's resulted in a spread and quarantine of our students as a result. I implore parents, and what you're going to see when we walk through these is that every single case that we contact traced has not traced a transmission at school. Transmissions are occurring outside of school. One of the fundamental differences, in my view, from building our reopening plan and to where we are today, I believe most of us thought that we were very worried that transmissions would be a major part of what we're dealing with today, transmissions within the school. In fact, I was very pessimistic that we would last as long as we did, and was quite pleased that we had made it when we hit week 5, that we were still open with controlled or measurable spreads. Some folks have said, why close? What your reopening plan says, if 2 buildings close, your district closes. That certainly could be reviewed, but the reason for that is this virus doesn't know what our boundaries are inside of our school district. It doesn't know that one street feeds to this school and the next street over feeds to another. So the notion was that if 2 buildings were forced to be closed, that indicated community spread. And I think we are witnessing, as evidenced by the fact that we are red in Lake County as of today, that we are experiencing increased community spread throughout our community. So again, 11 cases of students, 4 of staff over the course of the school year, and some new ones that we are currently working through. I do want to bring to your attention cases in our homes. So okay, can you pull up?
Bring it up for you? I probably could find it. Yeah.
Can you pull that up, please? So this document that you are taking a look at now, or will be pulled up just here momentarily. Okay, here it is. These are the number of families, not necessarily a student, but number of families in a specific school zone that have known cases of COVID in their homes, which again is another indication of community spread, and the fact that that number is rising is no surprise. So before I go through these numbers, Catherine, where did these numbers come from? Did you just make these numbers up? And where did you get these numbers from?
We've had a lot of help from our school nurses, and I'm going to walk you guys through what they're helping us to do. And so it basically starts on a school nurse page, which is not present in front of you, and they'll call and they'll flag someone. So as soon as they're flagged, they go to this tab that you see that's sick and exposed. And these are cases since the beginning of the school year that we eventually have to report to the Lake County Health Department. And as I scroll down, let me see if I can go slow enough to catch the ones from today. So these yellow ones are cases that have just popped up today, where we call and we say, okay, we have this person, they've been identified. Prior to that—
Who are you calling?
Lake County Health Department, I'm sorry about that. And then we have to interview them before this whole process. Before we call the health department, we interview each person. If you look, I'm going to scroll over if this will work. So on this particular person, which, you need me to make it bigger for you guys?
They're not going to be able to read it, Catherine.
Anyway, on each particular person, they tell us their history, they tell us what happened, and then we call the health department to report this. This particular person was at a bonfire on Saturday night, and then Monday morning woke up sick, found out the person that was at their house at a bonfire, which is an example of what they're telling us, they're COVID positive. So this will result in some quarantines here in our building. And then some of the other things that we track as a district, we are required to track our dashboard. This is the data that you see on the dashboard once it goes there. We have to track when it's active and when it comes out of active, which would mean they're not quarantined anymore. The Ohio Department of Health requires that we do that. We are supposed to track any school. These are school quarantine cases that you know of that we've already had, where we've quarantined people. These are home cases that you saw. These totals are not correct, just so you know, it's not adding up properly. But what we have to do is we have to track our students, which you're seeing this name over here, and then we have to track why they're positive, or why their house is positive. So those are the numbers that you saw reflected. For example, South High School right now has 11 positive houses. So it means someone there is positive and our student is quarantined. And then the last thing that we contact trace is we're to contact trace anyone in the district, students and staff, and how they became exposed. These totals, again, are not adding up properly, so don't look at those. But we track by building because the epidemiologists ask us to track geographically, and then they study each area. But they need to know how are people exposed, so we study people outside of their home and why they're quarantined and people inside. Make sense?
Thank you. So to give you an overview of that, this is the building and the number of families with COVID at a home in that district. You have South with 11, North 6, NCI Eastlake 1, NCI Willoughby 1, Willoughby Middle 4, Eastlake Middle 3, Willowick Middle 6, Addison 8, Grant 2, Royal View 9, Longfellow 5, Jefferson 5, Soy 4, and Preschool 1. So it is there. Again, the variable that I believe most of us would have predicted, which would have been widespread transmission in school, that piece is not happening. The transmissions are occurring outside of school. So is COVID really impacting people in our district? I think that's a fair question to ask. And I have a few examples that I would like to share with you. So this is a staff member, early 40s, previously healthy, is a runner with no previous health conditions. She identifies herself as the COVID long hauler. These are her words, not mine. I came down with a case of COVID-19 during the statewide quarantine. At first, I thought I was coming down with a cold. My first symptom was a slight sore throat. A couple of days later, I lost my sense of taste. This was strange to me because I was not experiencing any nasal congestion. Next, my lungs developed a strange tightness. The dry tightness continued for 10 days. On the 11th day, I developed muscle twitching, heart palpitations, and back spasms. In addition to these symptoms, my legs felt like they were on fire, and I developed a strange internal buzzing. I felt like a vibrating cell phone, sometimes for 13 hours at a stretch. Then the lung pain started. I had stabbing pains, fatigue, and a myriad of other strange symptoms. I ended up going to the emergency room on 3 separate occasions, twice in April and once in May. On 2 of those occasions, I went to the ER because of a very fast heart rate, and one time I went because I couldn't take a full breath. I was put on an inhaler and was given heart monitor to wear. I experienced an elevated resting heart rate for over 3 months. The disease came in 4 waves for me, each lasting 2 weeks, with the little waves in between the bigger waves. I was sick for about 3 months. Even now, over 6 months since my first symptom, I am not back to normal. In late May, I started having trouble with my circulation. For instance, my feet and hands would turn funny colors throughout the day. Even now, while I'm typing this, I'm noticing that my toes are turning purple. I had some tests done, and I'm testing in the high positive range for I'm going to turn to our doctor.
Antiphospholipid antibody.
There you have it. I'm not going to repeat that. I'm happy that I can say epidemiology. I practiced that for a long time and didn't get to say it. This is the autoimmune response. It has been so since in both acute COVID and post-COVID cases. My immune system is attacking normal proteins in my blood, making me more susceptible to blood clots. I may also have some small blood vessel damage. I am now at higher risk for any cardiovascular event, PE, DVT, heart attack, stroke, etc. On top of this, I may also have some permanent lung damage. I could be worse. There are many things I'm grateful for. So I love her clothes. A second staff member, a much more current, recently exposed staff member. I'm 41-year-old female with no pre-existing health conditions. I have always been healthy, other than an occasional cold or flu bug that is typical during certain times of the year as a teacher of young children. I started not feeling well in the afternoon of Saturday, October 3rd. What began as a dizzy spell and mild scratchy throat turned into the longest 2+ weeks of my life. By Saturday night, my scratchy throat had turned into what I can only describe as feeling like someone was jamming a cheese grater down my throat. Gross, but true. I was certain I had strep throat, but on Monday, October 5th, I was tested for strep, and my test was negative. By this time, I had a terrible headache, no energy, and couldn't get warm. Over the course of the next 3 days, I went from bad to worse with a fever, a cough, and the cough just wouldn't stop. No appetite, a headache, felt like my head was going to explode. I preferred to be in a dark room, covered under 2 or 3 blankets with little to no sound. I had no smell, and everything I tried to eat tasted like salt. By the end of the first week, my fever had gone, but my muscles in my legs were cramping, and I started feeling like I couldn't get a good breath. My husband started taking me for very short walks twice a day around our block just to get blood flowing, because I had done absolutely nothing but sleep since the previous Monday. 2 days after that, my hands, lower arms, and parts of my face were tingling, and it felt like something was squeezing my chest, making it difficult to breathe. The breathing part made me feel more helpless than any other symptom. It doesn't feel good when you realize breathing isn't coming as easily as it should. Exactly 2 weeks after the onset of my symptoms, I had one of the worst days thus far. I had so little energy that I could not even brush my teeth that morning. I spent much of the day sleeping. I was 2 weeks in and frustrated and disappointed to still be having issues. I've had some improvement since starting prescribed antibiotics and steroids, but now completed my medication, and I'm still experiencing symptoms such as fatigue, headache, and persistent cough. Today I realize I have slept away 2 weeks of my life. Parent-teacher conferences are October 22nd, and up until this morning, I thought that was next week. I guess I didn't realize how much time had passed since my symptoms began. Since writing this letter, this person has been to the emergency room and is receiving further treatment. These are 2 of our staff members, and we have a student, an elementary student, who has an underlying health condition and is struggling a great deal, and I believe in the hospital today, or to the doctor today, for another return trip to the doctor. So we have a student experiencing extensive sickness, and we have 2 teachers who are still battling this virus. I share that with you in contrast for other emails. We've been inundated with emails. Thank you, all of you, for your emails. I've never read more emails in my life. This one, I just picked a few, but they're very indicative of many others. We do not have the capability to do virtual learning during the day while parents are at work. Our jobs do not give us the adjustment periods, let alone 1 day notice. You cannot expect hundreds of parents to be able to drop what they are doing for a living and stay home with their kids. Both parents work. This is 100% not an option for us. I want to let people know that at least on the first shutdown of our schools, we found out about that late Friday or early. I think my first phone call was Saturday morning. And to make a decision of that magnitude, and we made that decision of that magnitude in a couple of hours. That was as much notice as we could possibly give parents, because the virus is not giving me notice. So I think that's really important for parents to realize. This email is about a student who attends one of our schools and this is an alarming situation in my view. This student has autism, and the parent goes on to say that shutting the school system down because of 2 schools, I kind of addressed that earlier, but 2 schools really affects our son. To keep changing his schedule when he relies on routine is one of his main issues. When he is doing virtual learning, he is not getting the same education as when he's in the classroom. His father and I both work, and so we have to put the burden on our grandparents. He also attends CVAC. How is this going to affect his work? I hope this can get figured out. I hate to see my child not able to make progress. Comes as no surprise to any of you that I believe the vast majority of our students, some students learn well virtually. Some students can do that very, very well. For some kids, virtual learning might even be more effective for them than brick and mortar. But for many of our students, virtual learning is a very, very difficult process. And it impacts their learning. And probably our most susceptible students, or our most vulnerable students, would be our special needs students. Especially our students that receive services like occupational therapy and physical therapy. Pretty difficult to deliver those types of therapies through a virtual learning situation. I can tell you that I know that our teachers are doing, and our staff is doing the very, very best they can. I also want to put it into a rumor or a notion that somehow these decisions are influenced or impacted by financial status of the school district. There has never been any discussion or had any finances, any impact on the decisions that we are making. We are making the decisions for what's in the best interest of our students, the best that we can, and what's in the best interest of our staff, and what we hope is in the best interest of the community. Finances play no role. Please call our treasurer. We have a plan. Call him a lot. Actually, call him more than me. He's really good at answering questions. But we have that has absolutely no impact on the decisions that we are making as a school board. I want the community to know that, or as an administration. Some of you may or may not know, the board, I believe, knows that I'm a prior military person, and I was on active duty in the first Persian Gulf War and called back to active duty after the second Persian Gulf War. And to know that you are potentially leading troops in a combat environment, once as a platoon leader and once as a company commander, it's an overwhelming responsibility, because you make the wrong decisions, you could cost someone their life. And so all through my educational career, this is my 16th year as a school superintendent, every time I would feel stressed or feel like the job was a little bit overwhelming, I would hearken back to those moments and think, no, this is nothing. For the first time in my educational career, it's on par. It's the same overwhelming sense of responsibility to know that your decisions could in effect kill someone. So when you think that we're making decisions without thinking them through, please rest assured that's simply not the case. So lastly, if you could pull up for me, am I qualified to make a recommendation to this school board about a pandemic? The answer is no. I am not qualified to make a medical, because that's what this is. This is a medical recommendation. I am not qualified to make a medical recommendation. So we went to the person that is the closest to us, the most accessible to us, that has access to an epidemiologist. See, I told you I'd work that in somewhere. To an epidemiologist, which is, for those of you who don't know, which I wouldn't have known either, is a infectious disease doctor. So we posed these questions to the director of the Lake County General Health District, and they're up for the board to see right now, but I'll read them. It says, these are the questions we posed. Now that Lake County has moved to level 3 red, what recommendation do you have for the district regarding students returning to the classroom? And the response was, it is my recommendation that you continue to operate in the same manner that you are currently operating. If the state or county feel that it is unsafe in schools, we will take action. Remain confident that the safeguards we have will get us through this. It is as safe as it can be for students and staff. I would ask, and this is Mr. Graham speaking, not me, I would ask that your children, if they do not feel right or exhibit symptoms or they are ill, please keep them home. That's important. Second question. According to the data, Lake County cases of COVID-19 have risen. Do you believe that the state of Ohio will continue to move in this direction? Lake County is doing better than most counties in the state in regards to infection rate. Other factors such as ICU, CCU counts also go into the decision-making process. Presently, none of the indicators indicate a need to change school operations and classroom instruction from your current operations. Third question. What do you believe you will see Lake County as the cold and flu season arrives? What do you see happening, or what do you see the impact on Lake County? With the onset of the cold and flu season, there will be a reluctance to test for flu versus COVID-19, and this will contribute to confusion. This most likely will cause an increase in what will be reported as COVID-19. Question 4. Is there a possibility of the governor making a recommendation, issuing an order, or giving school districts direction? I do not believe the governor will issue an order at this point, as a majority of the community spread is happening outside of the classroom. And I support that. That is consistent with what not only we're seeing in Willoughby-Eastlake, it's also consistent with what other superintendents are reporting from Lake and Geauga County. I would caution people from letting down their guard. Many exposures are happening at small gatherings, such as bonfire in a friend's backyard. Please be cautious in all settings. How safe are schools remaining in person at level 3? It's a core question. The alert levels are somewhat arbitrary and do not always reflect the risk of COVID-19 in specific areas. Very few, if any, outbreaks have occurred due to classroom exposure. The source of many infections appear to be small gatherings, family get-togethers, and travel. Will the school district be expected to continue to contact, trace, and quarantine students and staff members that are exposed to COVID-19? The answer was yes. Based on the current cases recorded in Lake County, what do you recommend for Willoughby-Eastlake City Schools? His response was, based on current protocols that your school district has in place, we would recommend that you continue to follow those protocols and allow students to return to the classroom on Monday. We will continue to work with you to quarantine students and staff when necessary due to any exposures of COVID-19. I do want to say that contact tracing just got a whole lot more difficult if you have not seen the latest directive from the CDC. That states that instead of a 15-minute exposure within 6 feet to be considered close contact, it is now a 15-minute exposure over the course of 24 hours. That's problematic at a lot of levels because it's difficult to contact trace now. Once again, I would tell you that that is one more responsibility that got pushed on local schools with no funding, with no training, with very little guidance. I do want to say thank you to Catherine Deal, who has worked very, very hard at making herself as close to an expert as you can on your own and working hard. And you can see the documents she keeps, and she does an excellent job of keeping me informed and thus keeping the school board informed about what's going on when we make these incredibly difficult decisions. So that's going to make our job moving forward more difficult. And last thing before I make my recommendation to the board, one thing that I would like to do is reach out to an epidemiologist, an infectious disease person, perhaps at Case or Cleveland State, or make that connection and try to put together an advisory board, bring our reopening plan to a group of people that are in fact experts, or at least the best that I could possibly assemble, have them review that document, and then I'll bring that document back to you in November for your approval of any changes that would need to be updated to our reopening plan. Again, it's a fluid document. Folks, I know that's frustrating. Believe me, for a person like me, that's really frustrating. I like it to be this way and that way, but life isn't always this way and that way. So I ask that you bear with us as we make these difficult choices. No matter what choice we make, there's going to be people out there who are upset, and we understand that. But based on the fact that we are not seeing spread in our schools, and based on the recommendation of the Lake General Health District, my recommendation would be that you approve our students returning to school on Monday. But I have to say this caution, I don't say it mostly to you, I say it to the community. Know that if this spread starts negatively really impacting our staff or our students, I will not hesitate to close school. And you need to be prepared for that to be a possibility. I do not know what the future holds. So it's really important. I want our students to be back in school because I believe overall that's what's in the best interest of our students. But I won't, the risk level that I'm willing to tolerate is only so far. And I need, as you all need, to be able to put your head down at night and know we are balancing the needs of our families, the mental health of our students, coupled with the reality that we know this is a real disease, that while maybe it doesn't impact 20% of the population, those that it does attack, that don't get over it in a few days, like some of the examples I read to you, are real and they're life-changing. And so with that comes a heavy responsibility. So that concludes my report, Mr. President.
Well, thank you very much for your report. Before we can have discussion, we would need to have a motion to accept Resolution 1C. That is, be it resolved that the Willoughby-Eastlake City Schools maximize previously established safety protocols and reopen all district schools on October 26, 2020. Do I hear a motion? Mr. Merhart.
I will make a motion to approve the resolution, reopen the schools on October 26th.
Thank you, Mr. Merhart. Do I hear a second?
Mr. President,
Mr.
I'd like to
Jones?
second that motion.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Now would be the proper time for discussion. Mr. Merhart, did you have?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the motion goes, I understand from both sides, and I've heard from both sides, of just talking to people in the community, and how much safer, I guess, can we make the schools? I mean, I know we talked to the health director, and are we confident that we're gonna have, one, enough teachers, and two, that we can, I guess, try to social distance maybe better than we have, or anything else we can do to limit any more spread?
Here's what I would say about our protocols, at least to date. We have contact traced every single student and staff member that we know has been either COVID positive or presumed COVID positive. In each instance, the virus was transmitted outside of the walls of the school. So I believe that to date our protocols have worked. Does that mean that they will work indefinitely as the numbers in Lake County rise? I hope so, but that's what we'll be monitoring very closely. And give you an example of, you also spoke in there or talked about staff. One of the biggest factors in closing the entire district that I don't think the public has generally understood. We had 51 staff members quarantined. We do not, although we do the contact tracing, we work hand in hand with Lake County Board of Health all the way through. And ultimately, they tell us, this is the people you are quarantining. It is not an arbitrary decision by the school district. We do all the legwork, but that conversation, we don't do anything without talking to Dr. Mohammed and working with the Lake County Board of Health. So when you quarantine that many staff members, folks, as I stated in August, and I'll reiterate today, one of the 3 factors that I believe that can knock us out are the inability to staff. There are not a lot of substitute teachers available. They've been hired and picked up. So we have been able to, especially in grades 6 through 12, we do I believe a fairly decent job of social distancing, because we have about 2,400 of our students virtual. So that automatically thins the numbers down. Now, as you know, we opened up the opportunity for parents to go virtual just a few days ago. And I know it was a short window to select to stay or to move from brick and mortar to virtual. We had a little over 200 more parents sign up to go virtual. We are extending that until Saturday. So we had closed it. We're going to reopen that window and we'll put out an announcement to remind people that it's open again. So if somebody's out there saying, hey, I'm uncomfortable with red, I am not sending my child to school in red, you're going to have the option to move from brick and mortar to virtual. So that's out there. So as 200 more students move online, and if more students choose to between now and Saturday, I don't know what that number is, that will further, in some ways, help us in terms of social distancing.
Mrs. Ernst?
How do our numbers compare in our county or like the closest, I mean, Menor is obviously the closest district to us with a similar group of, you know, the highest number of students. But, I mean, are our cases higher, less than, like, what are the trends that some other Lake County superintendents are seeing?
One thing to note is we are a district that came back sooner than most. We're the largest in Lake County and Geauga County, the third largest in Northeast Ohio. So by virtue of that, just statistically, we're going to have slightly higher numbers. But our numbers, they're higher than anyone else in Lake County, but not substantially. And I believe part of it is the fact that we have been very diligent about tracking and following up with the Lake County Health Department and talking to our parents. And as a student goes home sick, we follow up. We try to make, if they're exhibiting COVID signs, we encourage them to get tested. And I think that's really important. If you're going to get a handle on this disease, then, and stop the spread to the extent that we can in our little world, then you have to be able to effectively identify, effectively contact, trace, and quarantine. And if you don't do that well, then you might stay open a week or two longer, but then when you get hit, you're going to get hit. And so I think we're doing the best that we can do under the amount of control that we have to be able to do that.
Mr. Jones? Any questions?
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about in the last meeting was like bullying for reporting among students. And, you know, we kind of saw or heard about that last time. What can we do about that? Are we planning on doing anything? And then also what about encouraging parents to keep their kids home?
We believe, I have no quantifiable data to share to support my opinion, but it is through word of mouth that we hear from students that have been identified as COVID positive, the traffic on their cell phones or social media that they're receiving. And the reason for that is there's a perception held by some that it's not a big deal if you get COVID and you just need to keep it quiet because otherwise it's going to shut down our athletic season, our band concert, or whatever activity, school itself, and it's been problematic. So, and unfortunately, some of that's even gone into the parent realm as well. So that's been very difficult to control. I wish that I had a solution for that. From a school perspective, we'll treat it as bullying and move from a disciplinary perspective. But folks, students, if you're listening, if you want to keep your sports intact, we need to find out who's COVID positive and get people quarantined who's been exposed to them. Because if we don't, that's what's going to shut down our athletics. What's going to shut down our athletics or shut down school in general, you know, I received a picture. It was, I don't know, 10 students in a small area that looked like a basement of a home with food and pizza and chips and their laptops open, like having a study period together. No masks, no social distancing. Those are the types of things that I know kids want to do, but parents, we need you to say no. Students, we need you to police each other. You want to play basketball this winter? Then you need to make sure that those types of interactions aren't happening. And it's got to go beyond just the basketball team being smart. It's got to be the student population being smart.
Mr. Raskis?
If we reopen on Monday the 26th, how confident are you that we will stay open for a long period of time, based on our current plan in place?
I don't need, that's a question that I would I'm not trying to dodge your question. I think that's a very difficult question to answer. My goal or hope would be that we can at least get to the holidays. I'm most fearful of the holidays. And that's supported by what everyone's heard in the media from infectious disease experts and scientists. So that is going to be incredibly challenged, that coupled with all the things you all have heard on the media about closed bases, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know, but I would say that if our numbers spike, again, I want to get that plan reviewed, and I want to get it reviewed by some people that are smarter than me, and to give us some feedback based on their level of expertise. But if I again feel like, you feel like we're putting staff at risk, we're putting our student population at risk, and ultimately the community, then we're going to need to shut down not just the schools, but athletics and all of those other types of gatherings. And to me, at that point, it needs to be for at least some extended period of time, because as many parents have noted, we've talked about on the board level, the yo-yo effect is worse, I think, than doing one thing consistently. It's very, very difficult on our staff. It's difficult on our students, and as one of the mothers of the email that I read to you, a special needs student, that was a student with autism, changing their schedule every couple of weeks is not an effective way to deliver instruction. So I hope that we can make it through the holidays and get to our holiday break, but I don't know if that's possible or not. It's going to largely depend on how responsible our students and their parents are.
I'll-
One thing,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, before,
Go ahead.
I know you touched on it a little bit with the, like the special needs education, and that's something that I know has been a lot more challenging than even we kind of thought it would be. When we're talking with like the experts or trying to review this plan, I think we really need to try to see if we can get some input from them. If there's some way we can do something different with, like I said, the special education, because online learning I don't think is really an option for that group of students. So if there's anything we can do that's going to be safe, I think we need to try to explore that option, or at least see if it is something feasible.
Like, what you're saying is have the special kids in the classroom versus digitalized?
If it can be done, because, I mean, I know they're smaller classes, they don't tend to mix with other students as much, that they're kind of siloed, so it may be something that we can do that would still be a safe environment. I don't know if it'll work, but I'm just saying if there's a way we can look into that option, see if there's anything different we can do to make it easier.
Well, it's interesting that you would bring that up. We had a meeting today that involved Eileen Bowers, our Director of Special Education Student Services, and our union president and some other administrators, to try and figure out a way, if in fact down the road, or if in fact this resolution is not passed this evening, that we could in fact bring our most susceptible kids in, our most at-risk students in some way, at least on some type of hybrid model, in order to minimally receive services like OT and PT and some of those other high-need students. One of the risks that we talked about, disadvantage of doing it, is oftentimes these are our most vulnerable students from a health perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a concern or consideration. But we're working on coming up with a plan that would allow us to maximize social distancing with those students and bring in at least some of our most high-need students. So that is in the works. Again, that is something that would be great if we could put that advisory board together to have them take a look at it as well.
And that would extend also to the vocational education?
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that. We've already brought back our kids in career tech that are on hours-based programs. And again, it's, you know, probably most people don't know, but important to know. Let's say you are a senior in cosmetology, for example. You've already lost a bunch of contact hours from last March. If they don't hit enough seat time hours, they can't sit for their state boards. They can't sit for their state boards. They can never become a cosmetologist. So you essentially, I don't know if I want to say you, the disease, the situation, has taken away these students' ability to be licensed and go out and earn a living. And what do you, I mean, they'd be forced to go pay whatever the going rate is out there for cosmetology schools out there. So what a waste. And the same holds true with welding, you know, auto repair, auto collision. I mean, these are programs that are ineffective virtually. They are ineffective. So we you know, have increased our protocols to the maximum that we feel like we can do to try and improve safety as much as we can, and we are monitoring those students very, very closely. But if we can't keep those kids in school, we're ruining their opportunity to take advantage of the education that they should have received. So that's a great point. Our vocational students and our most at-risk special needs populations, and that's not to say that your child, who may not be either one of those, doesn't really need to be in the classroom too. But those are our most at risk. So if we end up being forced to go virtual at some point down the road, those will be two groups that will be working very hard to, at least in some form or fashion, keep in the classroom if at all possible.
So if we pass the resolution tonight, with the contact tracing now, it may be even a little harder to do and even more strict. I think one of the things that I've heard that I wanted to make sure that we understand is, when we go to the Lake County Health Department and say this person has been in contact with that person for 15 minutes, do they care if there are masks involved?
No. Masks do not matter. It is obviously.
Don't say it that way.
No, not that.
Let me rephrase it. In terms of being quarantined, that 15-minute contact is not required to be maskless. Obviously, we know, I firmly believe the masks are the difference. Kids are super compliant. They've been great. The kids have been great in school. And that's why we're not seeing transmissions in school. But in terms of the quarantine, it is 15 minutes of contact, masked or not.
So we can expect a lot of quarantine.
I think as our numbers rise, so do our quarantines. And if that knocks out our staff, it forces closure.
And that also includes the staff that's driving our bus.
Yeah, it includes the staff that's making the food. It includes the staff that drives our buses. It includes the staff that supports our teachers. It includes our teachers, obviously. So it's bigger than just teachers.
Like, what do the teachers or other staff people have to say about coming back on Monday? Is there, any resistance potentially from their participation or willingness? Because we extended the deadline for the parents to say, hi, I don't want my child to be in the classroom, I'd rather go digital, but like, there might be a second grade teacher that's a classroom teacher that might have that same mindset and say, okay, well, the county is red now, you know, I feel I'm more at risk or something, and I wanna be a digital teacher. You know, if you're a secretary, kinda hard to be a stay-at-home secretary, you know, or, you know, stay-at-home lunch worker, but, you know, some of our staff people can't be a digital staff person, but, you know, how are the staff people gonna feel when Johnny got an extension to be a digital learner, Johnny's parents did, but I didn't get an extension or any to be a digital employee?
Mr. Murphy and I, and I know Mrs. Govern did as well, and others, Mr. Patrick, we were, Mr. Patrick, Patrick McKinney. No offense, Mr. Patrick, the real Mr. Patrick. But we talked to as many teachers as we could during those days when they were in the buildings training. I would tell you that and we also spoke with the union president. I would tell you it's very reflective of what you see in the society in general. It's a whole lot of varying opinions. Some teachers some teachers don't feel like we should be out of the building at all. And others feel like we should. And some teachers are very leery and fearful of COVID, and some are less so. Unfortunately, we do have some teachers at the elementary level who are exclusively virtual teachers. And we tried to put the teachers who were most vulnerable in those positions where we could, but we couldn't accommodate everybody's needs, and we certainly couldn't accommodate everybody's wishes. So that part is very difficult and challenging. I do want the teachers to know that currently, to date, we've had 2 teachers, is it 2? Catherine, am I right? I don't want to misspeak. How many teachers, how many staff members have we had?
I'd have to look, to be honest with you.
I'll get the exact number. It's a single-digit number, less than 5, but because we had some exposures today. So it is not widespread at this point. It would, be way less than 1% total across the district. But if that number starts to rise, clearly staff members in generally speaking, are more vulnerable than students in terms of long-term impacts of coronavirus. So I'm very cognizant of that, and again, I will come back to the board and have a different recommendation if I see evidence that it is significantly impacted. So what we have up here right now is the most updated list in totality across the district. These are both active and inactive. We have 11 student exposures, 4 staff, for a total of 15 is our current complete level. But we know 2 of our staff members have been hit very, very hard, evidenced by the letters that they wrote. So I think the answer to that question is it is a very mixed bag, and I wouldn't profess that I have the knowledge or really right to speak for 565 teachers.
So those 2 staff testimonials that we heard, were those one active, one recovered?
That's
Cases?
correct.
So even that one.
But even the one that is closer to recovery still, as you saw at the end, still struggling.
I have a question as well.
Okay.
One of the questions that you guys posed to the Lake County Health Department talked a little bit about like the cold and flu season.
Right.
And in terms of like potential variance or like noise in any data, are there any like encouragement or resources that we can give people for flu vaccines, like point people in a direction? I'm not sure how effective that would be. I'm not sure what we're not allowed to, what information we're allowed to provide.
We generally have flu vaccines available for our staff in our buildings, but we got delayed. So do you, Mrs. Trevor, do you know anything about whether or not we're gonna be able to bring them back?
I have not had an update. I know we got through some cycles of staff and then we had to stop, but I can check tomorrow for an update.
We generally provide that every year, and, again, you know, by the time we got disrupted, but hopefully we can bring them back, and we always encourage staff members to receive their flu shot, and additionally, with the district health insurance and employee, you can go to CVS and get a flu shot for free. So that's, I just walked into CVS, got my flu shot.
Any other discussion? Okay, well, we do have a motion and a second to approve the resolution to maximize safety protocols and reopen all district schools on Monday, October 26th. Mr. Charnello, would you call the roll?
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Marrar?
Yes.
Mr. Roskis?
Yes.
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
Dr. Beal?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Mr. Maher?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Maher. Do I hear a second? Mr. Ross?
I will second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Roskis. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Charnello?
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Marrar?
Yes.
Mr. Roskis?
Yes.
Mrs. Zern?
Yes.
Dr. Beal?
Yes.
We are adjourned at 7:05 PM.
Thank you.